Okay, so today we are moving to the requirements that are applicable to CIC. So last session, till year sessions, we had discussed that when you're dealing with SI, you need to comply with capital regulations. When you're dealing with NSI, you have to deal with leverage requirements. Okay, so now we all understand that NSI is equal to BL and SI is equal to ML. That is the one view that we have already discussed on. Here, there is another class of NBFCs that is very important that we discussed in, I think, first or second lecture as well. What is CICs? So, just to give you an overview, CICs are basically companies that invest in group companies. 90% of their assets are invested in group companies, of which 60 are into equity of group companies. Rest 30% or so can be in debt. 30 to 40% can be in debt. However, 90 is minimum. The remaining 10% can be in prescribed assets. These are like PPE assets for running of businesses, some of the mutual fund, cash, or these kind of assets. One more thing that I would like to point out over here, that when we talk about these 90 and 10 criteria, these are based on net assets. This net asset is again a defined term under the CIC master directions. I think till here we had already discussed in our previous sessions. Now, the requirement that arises for CICs in respect to capital is known as adjusted net worth. So here what they mention is, as the term suggests, that here you have a requirement to maintain a net worth of certain amount. So a certain amount of net worth you are required to maintain. How much amount of net worth you have maintained? 30% of its aggregate risk-weighted assets. Now, what is risk-weighted assets? We discussed in the last session. So in the last session, we have already discussed what's the meaning of risk-weighted assets. So up to 30% of the risk-weighted assets should be your net worth. So when I compute your net worth, it should be 30% of the adjusted risk-weighted assets. Now, I am not only talking about the net worth, I am talking about adjusted net worth. So here there is a term called adjusted. So you all must by now, by the definition and all the discussions that we had in the last sessions, must have gotten up the gist that when we talk about net worth, that's basically owned funds. So what is owned funds? Basically, it's the net worth, all the equity and related instruments that basically comprises of my net worth. So here also, when we talk about the definition of adjusted net worth, it starts with own fund itself. And as the word adjusted net worth, here also we adjust the net worth for certain items to arrive at adjusted net worth. That's the entire gist of the regulations. But additionally, CICs also have to comply with a regulation where it says that outside liabilities of CIC cannot exceed 2.5 times the adjusted net worth. Okay, so here you need to understand two things. We have restricted CICs on two sides. One analysis is based on the riskiness of the asset. So when I'm talking about risk-weighted assets, the riskiness of the asset is based on the basis that we have to determine that 30% of adjusted net worth should not exceed that. So we have factored in the assets. Another side, we are saying that your outside liability should not exceed the adjusted net worth 2.5 times. Here we have seen the liability side. So there are twofold restrictions, one on the liability side and another is based on the asset size. I hope these two requirements are clear. Now of course, risk-weighted assets, there are specific risk weights prescribed under CIC master direction. You accordingly comply with those and calculate the risk weight assets. How do we compute it? We have discussed in the just previous session. Now, when talking about the outside liabilities, we will discuss about adjusted net worth. This starts with own funds. And as I mentioned, there are a few adjustments. So what are the adjustments over here? What we actually do is, we say that where you have invested into quoted investments, okay, 50% of the unrealized depreciation in such quoted investment is considered part of your net worth. I will give an example. Imagine an NBFC which has invested 100 rupees in a listed shares. Now, this listed share is currently valued at 150 rupees. So there is a gain of 50 rupees, but this gain of 50 rupees is not the part of your net worth. Now, as we have touched upon this point, actually, I did not go in this much technicalities while calculating while discussing on the capital regulations. But under capital regulation, there are norms that says where there are any fair valuation gains, we actually need to disregard those. So normally, when there are any notional gains or gains like these are actually not factored in while arriving at the capital. Okay. These being said, I would like to point out I would like to point out over here that over here, when I'm talking about CICs, they have been specifically allowed to take on 50% of the unrealized depreciation. So imagine a share of 100 rupees you had invested in. Currently, it's worth of 150. So there is a gain of 50. So what you will consider 25 rupees would be added to your net worth. So basically, what we are doing is we are considering as unrealized gain as a part of our profit, because this term I had explained over there. Okay, what actually happens is our profits actually become part of our capital, because when we earn profit, that profit gets adds up to the reserves, and those reserves are actually part of the capital. So when I'm earning any income, that actually becomes part of my capital. Here we have actually allowed you to factor in some income that has been not been realized yet. You have earned it. Actually, it's unrealized appreciation. Appreciation has happened, but you have not realized it. So this unrealized appreciation is allowed up to 50%. So first you add up those. And one more thing that they have added is increase, if any, in the equity share capital. So from the last balance sheet, if you have issued any new equity shares that are to be added into those owned funds, these are the two additions that you have to make. After this, there are two reductions to be made. One is, of course, there is uh, if you have made any capital reduction. Okay, so if there is any capital reduction, if there is an increase, it's added. If there is any reduction in capital share capital, it has to be subtracted. Uh, Apart from this, there are two reductions to be made. One is the amount representing direct capital contribution. So if a CIC has made any capital contribution in another CIC, so this particular contribution is reduced from the adjusted net worth. You all may recall in the last session, we had also discussed when I'm calculating net owned funds, investment by one NBFC into another is actually subtracted from the net owned funds. So when I'm arriving at net owned funds from the owned fund, I actually subtract investment by one NBFC into another. The same criteria applies to the CICs also. So if one CIC is investing another CIC, that particular investments are subtracted from the adjusted net worth. Just one point over here, that when I'm talking about NBFCs, the investment in excess of 10% of the own funds are actually disregarded, but over here entire investment is disregarded. No, sorry, even here it's 10%. Sorry, let me correct myself. Both these places, when I'm talking about investment in excess of 10% of your own funds in the another CIC is subtracted. Another part is where there is any diminution of value, there the entire diminution of some value. So let's get back to a previous example where I had invested in an equity share of 100 rupees. Now that equity share is only worth of 80. So this difference of 20, entire 20 is reduced from your adjusted net worth. Make it clear. If there is a gain, 50% is allowed. If there is a loss, 100% is to be reduced. Okay. I think this requirement for CIC is clear. With this, actually, I'm ending the capital regulations part. I know there are